Can you beat Dark Souls with no shield, no armor, no magic, and no summons? That's the challenge run I wanted to go for today. I've only played through Dark Souls 1 twice before, and even on those casual runs, I struggled quite a lot. So I wanted to do a challenge run that would push my personal skills and abilities to the absolute limit, to push me to my breaking point. And as you'll find out, that's exactly what happened in this run. Dark Souls is one of the hardest video games out there. You've probably heard of it, and if you haven't, I bet you've heard of Elden Ring, which is From Software's most recent title, and a spiritual successor to the Dark Souls series. Even if you've never tried one of these games, I invite you to come along with me on this brutal journey, and I'll try to explain some things so it's entertaining for you to watch as well. First, I create my character, the Furtive Pygmy. I choose the only class in the game that comes with no armor, Deprived. And don't worry, even though it shows a shield on the selection screen, you never have to equip it. Gifts are a free item that you get straight from the beginning of the game for free. The best gift is the Master Key, which allows you to access some areas of the game early. But just to make it that much harder, I decided to choose no gift. I'm sure this won't come back to bite me later. Oh look, there I am. I wake up in my cell and it's time to face the Undead Asylum. My first order of business is to take care of some goons around the asylum and collect my weapon, the club. This is the first time I've ever tried the Deprived class, and despite the bland stats, the club actually hits pretty hard. So it's time to face the first boss of the run, the Asylum Demon. I use the classic plunge attack to take out about half of his life right from the beginning. Despite the fact that I have almost no protection without a shield or armor, there are at least a couple things that are working in my favor on this run. The first being that your character moves and rolls much faster when they're not wearing heavy armor. This extra mobility helps a ton during boss fights. And the second is that there's a mechanic in the game where you can two-hand a weapon instead of one-handing it. While doing this, you can't use a shield, but you do deal much more damage. Since I won't be using a shield at all in this run, I can always two-hand my weapon for extra damage. And just like that, the first boss is down. And so, I get swooped up by the crow and land in Lordran for the first time. The Firelink Shrine is one of my favorite places in the game because it connects to nearly every major area of the map. I rest at the fire and then level up my strength and endurance stats with the souls I got from killing the Asylum Demon. During my first playthroughs, I was always super nice to NPCs, so I decided to shake things up on this run and become a complete jerk. I started up a fight with the Crestfallen Knight, and at this very early point in the game, he kind of has a lot of health to take on. But his taunts encouraged me, and I decided that killing him was no problem with a bit of cheese. There's a mechanic in this game where you can kick opponents. You are supposed to use this to knock down their shield, to let their guard down, but you can also cheese them off of cliffs like this. I was well on my way now, and decided to go pay the merchant a visit. After fighting some goons and rolling through some boxes, I made it. What better weapon to buy for this run than the Reinforced Club? But when the merchant told me to go fall off a cliff, I got a bit hostile. Oh well, more free items for me. Next up is the Taurus Demon, the second main boss of the run. He has a massive club and hits hard, but he's also pretty slow. Probably the hardest part about fighting him is that you're in such a confined space on the small bridge. You actually can use the plunging attack on him just like the first boss as well, but I decided to be a man and not use it. All I needed to do was roll right when he was about to strike me and hit him from behind. And then, unexpectedly, I accidentally cheesed him over the edge. Well, that'll work. Then I went up against a Black Knight. Oh, Dark Souls, why do you do this to me? I continued on my way, but got the living shiz beat out of me by these two. But that wasn't an issue because I quickly made my way back there and got my revenge. I lit the next fire and had Andre upgrade my club. It was time for some gargoyles, baby. These guys have long range with their halberds, and it's the first double boss of the game. They really aren't too tricky for experienced players though, and this is when I realized that my club was doing some amazing damage for this stage of the game. All the strength upgrades have been paying off, and I almost beat them my first try. On my third attempt, I was able to stay behind the first gargoyle for the most part. By two-handing my weapon, I was able to stagger him a couple of times and land some massive damage. I stayed far back for the second one's fire attack, and then landed the killing blow, finishing off the third boss of the run without even getting hit once. That was one bell down and one to go. From this creepy guy, I bought purging stones to cure curses, which I had a suspicion would come in handy later. Next up was killing this jerk to save the Firekeeper and to get the Ring of Favor. Good riddance. The Ring of Favor would come in quite handy for me because it increases both stamina and health. I headed to New Lundo next to take the shortcut to Blighttown. But, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about this whole no gift thing. This won't come back to haunt me, right? Right? I made my way down to the bottom half of Undeadburg. I then found the Mailbreaker dagger, which was huge because it would actually allow me to parry enemy attacks without a shield if I equipped it in my left hand. The next boss was Capra Demon, and I was quite worried about this fight because you have to fight not only him but two dogs in this very tiny enclosed space. Luckily, I was able to take out the dogs very quickly right from the beginning of the fight. And because there's a staircase in the tiny room, you can fall onto him with a plunging attack over and over for lots of bonus damage. When he finally got a hit on me, he took out half my health bar, and I was super scared I was going to lose. But I just kept hitting him, and I actually won first try. I could not believe this. Wow, look at how hard Andre is hitting that subscribe button. It looks like he's enjoying this content. That's why he's hitting it so hard. You wouldn't want to see his work get squandered, would you? That's why you gotta hit that subscribe button. Thanks, guys. Next, I made my way down, down, down to everyone's favorite place. The depths, otherwise known as the filthy rat sewer. I didn't really feel like dealing with the giant rat, so I just threw firebombs at it to cheese it from afar. Look, all I promised was no glitches and exploits, not that I wouldn't cheese boring mini-bosses. So, after having some fun with the rats, I finally found my way to the bonfire. Then I made it to truly the most evil enemy of the entire game, the basilisks. These guys release toxic fumes, and if you stay in the fume for too long, you'll become cursed. Not only does cursing kill you, but it also drops your HP to half permanently until you can get your hands on a purging stone. Then I found this guy and went ahead and bought the Crystal Straight Sword. I probably could have killed him for it, but I really didn't want to end up dying and having to come all the way back here again. Next, it was time to take on one of the scariest looking, yet easiest bosses in the game, the Gaping Dragon. This thing looks absolutely crazy, but as long as you stay behind it, it can't hit you very often. The only problem was, by the time I got to this guy, my health was super low and I had no more Estus flasks left. So after taking a single hit, I died, but I was soon right back into the fight. I was using the Crystal Straight Sword for this, because it was now the weapon that did the most damage out of all the ones I had at the moment. The only downside about it is it doesn't have much range, and it breaks much faster than all other weapons because it's crystal. But after about 900 butt pokes, I had defeated the Gaping Dragon, and was now ready to move on to the worst area in all of Dark Souls. Blighttown is a place that haunts the mind of any player who's beaten this game before. Let me just highlight some of the features the Blighttown has to offer, just so you can get the picture. Blighttown is dark. There's tons of enemies everywhere. You're on these wooden pathways that if you fall off of, you'll instantly die. There's multiple enemies that can either poison you or even worse, toxin you, which deals damage over time. And the whole place feels like this elaborate maze that you're trying to traverse in the dark while dealing with all the rest of that crap. This is the point in the game where a lot of new players quit, because this place has no mercy. It just wants to crush your hopes and dreams. Oh, and remember how I was wondering earlier if not picking the Master Key as a gift would be a mistake? Well, boy did I find out. You see, there's actually 2 entrances into Blighttown, and on both of my previous playthroughs, I had the Master Key to be able to take the entrance that's nearing the Valley of the Drakes. I always thought that entrance was bad, but I had no idea how truly merciful going that way was. I knew that this second entrance to Blighttown from the sewers existed, but I had never actually fully explored it. This way has to be at least 5 times worse than the Valley of the Drakes entrance. I was starting to get very frustrated very quickly. Unlike every other area in the game up to this point, I had no idea where I was supposed to be going or what I was supposed to be doing. All I knew was I somehow needed to make it to the bottom of this forsaken place. I was seeing animations and enemies I had never even seen before, like that guy eating off my face, and this little red demon dog that can breathe fire apparently. But eventually, by some miracle, I found the bonfire and I breathed a huge sigh of relief. But my suffering wasn't over yet. I still was only halfway through Blighttown and had no idea where I was supposed to be going. But then, suddenly, I got a massive stroke of luck. While I was messing around, I found a secret cave entrance to the left, which led me down to the lowest part of Blighttown that I'd ever been in, going from this entrance. I was getting very excited and nervous at the same time. I really didn't want to die, or else I would have to backtrack through this entire area again, and I didn't know if I would remember exactly how to get here. So I plowed through enemies and made my way all the way down, but on my way there I was hit with toxic, and I only had a few Estus flasks left. This was it. I had to make good use of my last flasks and make a mad rush for the bottom. I knew exactly where the fire was, I just had to get there. And now my flasks were completely gone. There it is, the fire. No! Are you kidding me? Blighttown is evil. So, you know, blah blah blah. I backtracked all the way through Blighttown all over again, and finally got out of this nightmare fuel place. I rested at the fire, and now it was time to take on Quelaag. One of the main challenges of fighting Quelaag is that she spews lava all over the floor of the arena. While you fight her, you have to make sure that you're not stepping into the lava, or else you'll die really quickly. I went into the fight with the halberd, which is what I had been using, but my damage output was pretty pathetic. I was going to need to bust out the crystal straight sword again for this one. Most of Quelaag's attacks are fairly predictable. With a well-timed roll, they're not a big issue to avoid. But she does have one attack that's a huge pain to deal with. It's an explosion that has enormous range. You have to be very far away from her to avoid it. You can tell when this attack is coming because her torso will fall, but I kept getting caught behind her legs and not able to run away in time for the attack. The funny thing is, I don't ever remember struggling with this on my earlier playthroughs, but I just kept getting caught in the collision of her legs over and over. I mean, look at this is silly. But finally, on my 14th attempt, things started to look up. I did get hit once or twice, and had to retreat to use an Estus flask to heal. But ultimately, I played it pretty well, and with my good damage output, the witch was defeated. That was 2 bells down, which meant Sen's Fortress was open for business, baby. Now I was all ready to take on Sif, or so I thought. You see, Sif has a lot of health, and even with my crystal straight sword, my damage output was pretty pathetic. Despite that fact, I actually came pretty dang close to killing him a couple of times. But eventually I decided it would be worth it to just come back later when I had a better weapon. On my way back, something truly amazing happened. I got into a fight with this Black Knight right here. These guys can actually drop their weapons, but it's only a 20% chance. He dropped the Black Knight Halberd. Now you might be wondering why this is such a big deal. You see, Black Knights are one of the few enemies in the game that never respawn. That means you only get one shot at getting their weapon for each knight, and there's not many in the game. And the Halberd is actually the best one out of all of them, with a base power of 245. It's such a good weapon, in fact, that many speedrunning categories use it. But it has a dexterity requirement of 18, so I would have to level up my dexterity a few times before I could properly use it. So it was finally time to storm Sen's fortress. My first major obstacle was this guy on a tiny bridge. Because I had no shield and armor and almost no room to roll, he was really hard to deal with. Thankfully, that Mailbreaker dagger came in handy, and I was able to use it to parry him and continue my way through the fortress. After dodging some balls and avoiding some traps, I fought a few more serpent dudes and eventually made it out of Sen's fortress. Man, it's always so nice to see this fire. So it was time to stab this guy up the butt and take on the Iron Golem. This guy loves to grab you and throw you. Some of the time I'd get pretty lucky with this and just land on the ground. Other times I wasn't so lucky. This guy's main deal is being thick, so it takes quite a lot of hits to kill him. But the nice thing is, as long as you stay behind him, it's super easy to avoid almost any of his attacks, outside of the grab of course. But with enough strong two-handed attacks, you actually can stagger him and get in a lot of free damage. And after a few tries, I got him. Now it was time to go to the game's most breathtaking location, Anor Londo. My first priority was now to level up dexterity to level 18 so that I could properly use the Black Knight Halberd. So I got to work killing these gargoyles, and at last the unrestrained power of the Black Knight Halberd was mine. Now, getting into the Anor Londo castle is notorious for being one of the most frustrating parts of the game. You see, you can't just go through the front door. Instead, you have to go around this long side area. These winged demon things can be quite annoying to deal with. But thanks to my Black Knight Halberd, I was actually able to take them out in just a couple hits this run. But they're not actually the most frustrating part about getting into the castle. That award goes to the Silver Knights that stand on the left and right and try to snipe you as you go up this tiny little walkway up to a small ledge on the side of the castle. I mean, just look, this is what they do to you. These guys are a major pain to deal with, even when you have a shield to block their arrows. But without a shield, I was quite worried about how this was going to go. I was dodging their arrows like crazy, and by some miracle, I was able to roll through that arrow and finish this guy off. That meant that on only my third try I was in, which was probably faster than either of my previous two playthroughs. It was time to prepare to fight the hardest boss in the game, Ornstein and Smough. So I gathered all the souls in Twinkling Titanite I could, and upgraded the Black Knight Halberd all the way up to level 3. My gosh, this double boss is one that I will never forget. It is permanently burned into my memory from all the times I died the first time I played through the game. You have to fight both of these guys at the exact same time, and even if you kill one of them, there's a phase 2 where they become more powerful. This is one part of the run I dreaded before I even started. When it comes to what makes these guys so tough, it's pretty much everything. One of them's super fast, and the other one is slow but hits like a truck. They do extra damage with their electric attacks, and because you're dealing with both of them at the same time in such a small space, there's really nowhere to hide and heal, and it's like your heart is constantly racing. But wow, was I doing a ton of damage with the Black Knight Halberd at level 3. Its base power was at 318, which was way more than the weapons I had on either of my previous playthroughs. Shockingly, on only my second attempt, I had defeated Ornstein and moved on to phase 2 of the fight. This meant I would have to go up against the super powerful version of Smough. I still have nightmares to this day about all of the many times I died to his electric butt slams. And things weren't looking good. I had just used my last Estus flask, which meant no more healing. This meant I was going to have to play it perfectly if I wanted to win. The added mobility of not having to wear heavy armor was helping a bit. But I took a huge hit from the electric butt slam and only had a tiny bit of health left. The butt slam, just like Quelaag's explosion, covers a huge area, and unless you're really far away from him when he's about to do it, the only thing you can do is do a perfect dodge and use your tiny bit of invincibility you get from a roll to dodge the electricity. Which is exactly what I did once, twice, and even 3 times in a row. And this was it. With such little health left, I just had to go all in. And I won on my second try. I literally was jumping out of my chair and freaking out. I could not believe I actually pulled this off. It was a literal miracle. I'm not exaggerating when I say I literally thought I'd be stuck on this fight all day. With my most dreaded boss out of the way, I was feeling amazing. And with all the souls I got from the fight, I decided to boost my strength like crazy. I was off to fight the 4 lords. I decided to go after Seath first, right after I dealt with these glitchy pigs. Man, I never knew lighting a bonfire could be so dangerous. It was time to fight Seath the Scaleless. This guy definitely deserves to die. He committed mass genocide on his own people. And I mean, dragons are sick. Who doesn't like dragons? Come on. But on my first attempt, I got invaded by crabs, which were quite annoying as I was trying to fight Seath from behind. You see, his main thing is sprouting crystals from the ground to kill you, or just mashing his gigantic tentacles to obliterate you. Wait a sec, listen to the music of this fight at 300 times speed. Doesn't this kind of sound like the Mario Invincibility Star theme?
Mamma mia!
Anyway, I died and got cursed. And guess what? I was out of purging stones. For some reason, I thought it was a good idea to sell every last piece of armor I had to get souls to buy another purging stone. After selling all those items, I only got 5,928 souls, which wasn't even enough to buy 1 purging stone. But my pocket souls came in handy, and I got myself uncursed. On my 13th attempt, I finally found a good pattern to deal with Seath. By continually running to the right and hitting the front of his right tentacle, I was able to deal lots of damage without taking any serious hits. I upgraded my Black Knight Halberd to +4 and was ready for my rematch with Sif. You didn't have to put your butt in my face, okay? But no, for reals, I actually did beat him eventually, okay? You believe me? Alright. And with the Covenant of Artorias ring, I was finally able to traverse the abyss. Did I mention I love this game? Outside of Ornstein and Smough, the 4 kings were my second most dreaded boss of this run. Not only do they have long range with their massive swords, but also another super annoying explosion attack and grab that deals more than half your health bar without armor. I struggled quite a lot with these guys on both of my previous playthroughs, and that was when I could actually block attacks. This time around, I was going to have to time my dodges perfectly and figure out how to properly avoid the explosion and grab attacks, since I couldn't afford the damage. I ended up dying to these guys a lot. It felt like no matter what I did, I could not avoid their stupid grab attack. And unless I reacted extremely quickly to the startup of the explosion attack, I wouldn't have enough time to get away from it. This fight was rough, and definitely one I would not recommend trying without a shield or armor. There were several attempts where I came very close to beating them. You have to defeat all 4 of them one after another to get their health bar all the way to 0. And if you take too long while fighting one, a second one will appear and they'll both fight you at the same time. But I was getting better. I could now pretty consistently avoid the explosion attack, and even avoided the grab a few times. But the real trick to beating them would be to bring it all together in a single attempt where I got everything right. And finally, On my 27th attempt, that's exactly what happened. Everything fell into place, and dodging these attacks kind of just became second nature to me after all these tries. There was only one king left, and after avoiding his explosion, I finished him off. Now I truly believed the worst was behind me, right? Next, it was time to go deep, deep down into the catacombs. But before I could face off against Nito, I would have to face the most dreaded boss in the entire game. The only boss that's worse than both Ornstein and Smough and the Four Kings. I'm talking about Pinwheel. Oh, he's dead. Now it was time to face off against Gravelord Nito. On my previous playthroughs, I had always found him to be a little bit easier than most of the other lords. I mean, he's pretty big and slow, and he does have a horde of skeletons that fight alongside him, but these had never been more than anything but a minor annoyance previously. Right off the bat, I was dying pretty quickly, but I just needed to get used to the fight again, right? You can kill his minions, but after a short amount of time, they come back to life. Nito even kills them himself sometimes with his big sword slashes and his explosion attack. So my first strategy would be to take some of them out and then get a few hits in on Nito. At first glance, it seemed this strategy might have some promise to it. It would give me the opening I needed to deal some serious damage on Nito himself. But I was quickly realizing that unlike casual playthroughs, even these tiny skeletons were doing serious damage to me. I never realized how valuable it is to be able to block their stupid rolling attacks and to tank hits with my armor. These guys were everywhere, and it was starting to feel like it was impossible to even land a single hit on Nito without getting stabbed in the back 5 times in a row. This fight was a hot mess, and I did not know what to do about it. I was getting wrecked over and over and over again. Despite everything I tried, nothing was working. And this wasn't all that was working against me. To even enter Nito's arena, you have to fall and take damage. And by far, Nito's worst attack to deal with is this giant red spike that can just spurt out of the ground right under your feet. The only way you can know that it's coming is the screams that you hear in the background. Right when the screams are about to end, that's when the spike shoots out. But listening for this and reacting to it properly is nearly impossible when you're fighting 3,000 skeletons all at the same time. It's pretty ridiculous. I mean, just look at this attempt. The man has no mercy. But after grinding for a few hours, this attempt happened. I was so close to beating him, I knew I could do this. And after many, many hours of pure pain and suffering, it came down to this. I was completely out of Estus, and was hanging on by a sliver of health. And Toxic was draining what little I had left.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
This boss truly became the demon of the run, and there was so many times I just wanted to quit and give up entirely. Fighting him in this challenge was like the equivalent of trying to dig through concrete with only your fingernails. But somehow, on my 52nd attempt, I finally beat this stupid guy. I celebrated this victory even more than my Ornstein and Smough victory from earlier on in the run, because Nito was somehow 10 times harder than any other boss I had fought so far. My last lord to fight was Bed of Chaos, the most poorly designed boss in all of Dark Souls. It's a joke. You spend the entire game honing your combat skills, only to be thrust into a boss fight where you can't even touch the boss. It's literally a puzzle, and outside of this, there's hardly any puzzles in Dark Souls as a whole. Ugh, I despise this thing. Rant over. At last, it was time to put all the souls into the Lord Vessel and open up the way to Lord Gwyn, the kiln of the First Flame. I got a little bit of practice in parrying and doing some backstabbing against these Black Knights right outside of Lord Gwyn's arena. My new parrying dagger was working perfectly. So I entered into the final boss fight with nothing more than a parrying dagger in my left hand and a Black Knight halberd on my right. I think I'll just let this one play out for you guys. I had done it. I had beat Dark Souls with no armor, no shield, no magic, and no summons. What an insane journey. This video took a ton of time to make and edit. The way that you guys can help me is by leaving a like on the video and subscribing for many more game challenges in the near future. I also try my best to read all the comments on my videos, so I'd love to hear what your favorite part of this run was. Thank you guys for watching.